everyone, and welcome to Odd Ducklings. Today we are having with us Ruby Yuen. Ruby, tell us a bit more about yourself.
Yeah. Daria, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I'm honored to be your second guest. So I'm Ruby. I'm based out of Seattle, Washington. I was originally from Hong Kong. My family moved, me to Seattle when I was the age of 15, 16. Went to high school, college in United States, along with a year of exchange program in Japan. After graduation, the job somehow moved me back to Hong Kong, and I worked with various investment bank for the past 15 years, being a product manager, program manager, and then slowly moved myself into what we call the program manager in the anti-money laundering space. Came back to
Wow.
Seattle 8 years ago, worked, and that's how I pivot into what we call the trust and safety industry, becoming a program manager and pivot into product 3 years ago. I worked in two startups from B2C and B2B as a senior product manager for trust and safety. And then recently decided to become a career coach for people that are interested in product, program manager, or trust and safety.
Sorry for interrupting you midway there. That's want to say, to begin with, this is such an impressive resume. Just a bit of a highlight for our listeners. Today we decided to talk about identity, self-identity, with Ruby's story going through so many countries and so many migration situations and few impactful events in her life. I think this is something that Ruby can really teach us about how your position in the world, how you accept yourself actually impacts your ability to thrive. So Ruby, with that, coming back to you, where do you see yourself? What is currently your identity?
Yeah, that's a great question. Looking at where I stand right now, I would tell people that my identity as an immigrant, working mom, coming to United States and trying to help other people to achieve what they want in the career goal. That's the highlights of where I am right now, but it definitely came a long way. So a bit more about my background. How did I come to that? Number one, in the story we just talked about, I moved from Hong Kong to Seattle when I was in high school, then moving back to Hong Kong for work, and then moving back to United States. And also, while I was in Hong Kong, one of the highlight I want to say is that I was based on Hong Kong, but I work mostly majority across the entire Asia. So I spent a lot of time in Japan, then working in Southeast Asia, Singapore, and then also working with various countries all the time. So part of me, the identity for as an immigrant is sort of comes into the nomenclature as an immigrant. But as I'm looking at where I am right now, I tend to think myself as a global citizen at this point because you move from one place to the other, you try to adopt, but then at all the time, as you move, as the work is smaller and as you're working for with more people, you are less self-conscious about you don't have the perfect accent or you might have different languages. But at the end of the day, I found it very fulfilling that despite now I'm standing in the United States, I'm a an immigrant. At the end of the day, it doesn't give me any feeling any less than anyone that was born in America. I'm more thinking of I'm a global citizen right now, and I'm speaking to everyone right into your soul. But at the same time, I went through this whole growing up as an immigrant, so I knew the challenge as an immigrant, and I try to be very empathetic of what they are and looking to way to help and share my experience and empower them that how do we overcome the challenge that we had. But more we frame it as a way that is it a challenge, but at the same time, it helps us to reframe how do we tell our stories.
I assume what you're talking about is a bit of the process that you go through when you help other people right now as a coach, which is an incredible thing to do to begin with. So bravo. But B, you kind of fine-tuned this through your experience. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah. Definitely. So let me give you an example. When I first moved to Seattle, Washington with my mom and my brother, the three of us were living together in a small town in the United States. Back then, there were nobody speaking the language that we speak, and we were one of the few families were there. So adding on to that, my mom didn't speak a word of English. So that naturally all the responsibility of communicate with other kind of fell onto me because my younger brother was really young then. Back then, the struggle was that me as a teenager in a high school, I'm also trying to figure out how do we try to understand what other people talks about. Initially, when I lived through the school, it was very challenging for me because number one, being one of the few Asians in the school, there's a lot
Mm.
of I wouldn't say there's a lot of discrimination, but there's a lot of,
Children can be
childhood
mean,
culture,
right?
kids
Whoever's
who think,
different.
yeah. Yeah. So for example, like I was there for the first year, I couldn't quite understand what people were saying. I can read what they said, but there's a lot more nuances of the American culture in a daily
Yeah.
conversation that you couldn't quite understand it. Number
Yeah, a
two,
language barrier is something that happens to a lot of immigrants, right? So 6 years ago, I migrated to Berlin.
mm,
And just a bit side note, a lot of the people that talk to me regarding this podcast migrated a huge percentage, like 80%. And I talk to a lot of people. And it seems to be something that's also very common with people that consider themselves neurodivergent to kind of look for themselves. In your case, this was not something that you initiated,
correct.
but still the focus on the challenge of the language, that's something that I totally understand. I can really relate to.
So trying to understand what the people saying at school was challenging initially. Adding to that though, because my mom couldn't speak English much, one funny story is that she grew up in China during the Cultural Revolution when Russia and China were alliance. So she actually grew up speaking Russian instead of learning English. So it
Oh.
was really funny that you're looking at a Chinese looking lady but speaking Russian accent English to begin with. And so that kind of
Mm-hmm.
add like really odd scenario that whenever she tried to explain to something to people in English, nobody can understand what she said. So that kind of fall to me. In addition to my daily conversation with the school, I need to learn to get on the call with customer support, fighting the phone bills, try to adjust everything. So that was a lot onto me as an immigrant kids because the parents, in addition to your identity as a teenager, you also have to deal with taking up a lot of family responsibility to
Yeah.
overcome the language barrier. One thing I want to say that's where the challenge is because initially I was very frustrated, not able to communicate the idea across. Adding a teenager girl too, you become very self conscious. Like maybe my
You were
accent
also a
might be
bit
not.
parenticized, right? In that
Mm-hmm.
sense, because you need to take the role of a parent in this case.
Correct. So it was very challenging back then. And also adding on, people were judging you for not knowing, able to speak the accent that you're supposed to looking for. So that was all kind of add to it. Now, one of the things I want to talk about here is that as I growing up, looking back, as I'm also like through this whole experience, it was challenging, but at the same time, I learned the fact that a lot of time it wasn't about the English vocabulary they're not good enough, it wasn't about the accent. And so majority of the communication back then was just a matter of knowing the local terms, the culture
Mm.
to begin with. So with that mindset, it really alleviated me being so conscious about I was not perfect in grammar, I might not be perfect on using the most complicated vocabulary and expression in the world because knowing the fact that it's so much about you just don't know the brand or certain food or location that stop you from understanding the context. But once you knowing that when you don't understand certain context, instead of, being very insecure and feeling that you're not confident, I've learned through time, it's just about learning the context. So I reframe this as a way to be curious and ask about,
Hmm.
oh, you talked about post-it. What is that? It sounds like posting. I can put something on the wall, but I don't know what you're talking about. Is that something you
Hmm.
can show me? And with that, though, it avoided you for feeling that you just don't know the thing. You feel embarrassed. But at the same
Okay.
time, you get the chances to ask the other end, oh, post it actually means something like
Like,
this.
yeah, like this little post-it.
Yeah. Versus growing up in Hong Kong, we call sticky notes.
Oh, yeah, I guess so. Um, I love that point. I can even kind of reflect not growing up as an immigrant
Mm,
on moments where I was talked down to. I have
mm,
one specific memory of me going back to the school I went to as a kid
mm,
and talking to a teacher that didn't really appreciate me, and then she said the word globally, which she said it in English, and my language is not English. So I was like, what does that mean? She said, like, what, you don't know? And I remember me telling her, like, if you don't tell me, there's a very high likelihood that I will not know. Because at
mm,
that point, naturally, we didn't have phones to just Google it right this second.
right.
And it's about being not being too proud to ask, but also being very adamant
Mm,
about the fact that even if I should know this, it's absolutely okay if I don't. And
yeah.
if I ask, then I learn and I grow. And it's such a hard learning curve for me. It was so hard to reach that point.
Yeah. I can totally echo that. Another example was that when my family moving back to Seattle 8 years ago, along with my daughter and my son, back then my daughter was fifth grade, and we put her in a local elementary school back then. I remember one day she came home to me and she was saying that after the school break, the teacher want each of them to show their move, the Michael Jackson move of the moonwalk, walking back into the classroom. And she was like, "What is that? What is
It
that?"
wasn't
Like,
part of something that she knew, even.
it was
Yeah.
something that she never know of. Culturally, she just never being exposed to Michael Jackson, which is now I'm making her to listen all the time until she gets sick of me. So the way we were doing,
I
so
love how that's your introduction to, okay, now you need to get educated. Now you listen to all of the Michael Jacksons. Of
right,
course you do.
it's one of those like mom's moments like back in my day, and you just have to make them to listen until they get really tired of you.
Hmm.
Anyway, but it's one of the cultural contexts. She was
Yeah.
nervous and she felt like very she was not happy because she doesn't know what to do. She froze before entering the classroom because she doesn't know what to do. And adding on to that, everyone in front of her were doing some sort of move, which doesn't equally visualizing the Michael Jackson moonwalk too. So she was trying to like figure out what is going on here.
Hmm.
So it was very interesting experience too. And that to that end, I talked to the teacher, and the teacher was very kind. She was telling me that, I'm not going to give your daughter any homework that night. All you need to do is like go to YouTube and watch the Michael Jackson moonwalk in different version edition. You kind of get the
Oh,
gist
that's
of what it
lovely.
actually mean. And I felt that was like a very epiphany moment for me to learn that a lot of time it isn't about the vocabulary or about the accent or about
It's
the
about the culture.
expression. Is rather a lot of it is culture and context.
Okay.
This is where one of the big things that I do want to share with everybody, because it really helped me, and it was very liberating to think of this after all this example, because all this time as an immigrant kids in the United States growing up, in high school, I was very insecure and very self-conscious about my accent, my presentation, try to be assimilate as much as I can. But after
Yeah.
all this example, it keeps telling me that a lot of time when you are thinking so much about yourself, a lot of it wasn't just about me, and it doesn't matter how hard I try. A lot of the time it's like reframe it as a way for you to learn about a culture, a lot of context. And
Hmm.
instead of being embarrassed to ask the question, it might be good just kind of like, I'm curious, what are you talking about? Show me. Because turn out, my goodness, you cannot believe how many versions of Michael Jackson moonwalk, Prodigy, whatever you got. So even that,
Yeah.
everyone thinking differently in their mind of the same subject that
I
everyone talks about.
wonder. Because from your story, originally what I thought you'd be saying is, I told her, like, just ask them, or she just asked them. But apparently, at the end of it, she may have learned that she can ask and it's okay, but she
Yep.
didn't. But this would be a lesson for next time, right? This would be
Mhm.
something that she
Yeah.
knew
Yeah.
it was okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, after she watched multiple version of Michael Jackson, she did ask. She was like going out to classmates, like, "Okay, I think I watched this version of Michael Jackson. It wasn't quite exactly what you show me, but it was like, it's your best effort." And that's actually turned out really fun because they trigger interesting conversation between my daughter and her classmates about,
Mm-hmm.
hey, number one, all the parents actually forced the kids to watch Michael Jackson, but indeed, everyone watching different versions of different things.
Oh, wow.
Um,
I feel so old that this is something people need to teach someone. All right. I want to focus for 1 second because we talked about all of these solutions and your identity and how it led to your high school life, your younger life. If we jump a bit forward to your professional life, how did that kind of manifest there?
Yeah, that's another great topics
Thank
about.
you. I
So
try.
fast forward, today I'm a working mother's working as a product manager and a career coach. And I would say the other identity that I would like to share is being a working mother in addition to your day job.
Yeah.
A lot of I've tried to read a lot of books and there are different advices, but I realized that there's not a single book that will tell you exactly what to do. And you constantly being a working mother, you constantly juggling with time and focuses, but the major call outs that you feel like you're not doing a good job in anywhere.
Yeah.
For example, I, the day job sometimes require me working a lot of hours and you're away, but in the same time, you feel like you're not, at the time when you get off the work, you wanted to spend time with the kids, but you also sometimes realize that you're not present because you've been thinking a lot about work and you feel like if you don't think about work and get the work done, you are behind of your work compared to your colleagues that may not have kids and more free time. But at the same
Mm-hmm.
time, being a mother, you always want to be there for the kids and do what they want. Like you want to spend time with them.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you look at the other parents who are more available, you also feel like you never have enough time for them. So that was always a struggle, me as a working mother, that we only talked about how we're going to
Yeah.
deal with that today, every day.
Right. Ruby, that was amazing. Thank you for that. There's one thing I kind of want to ask you because we did talk about this to some extent. This podcast is mostly about career, neurodiversity, and also naturally a lot about the mental health that needs to be taken into account. That's also why we're talking about identity here. What would you be open to sharing with us regarding this and its impact on your identity?
I would try to answer in this way. The way how I juggle or upkeeping my mental health is basically based on two things. One is that I'm a Christian, so with my religion and faith, that give me a lot of strength to explain. I do
Mm-hmm.
believe there are God out there that will do the superpower and supernature to taking care of me. My focus, that helped me to only focus on what I can do within my control and limits. And it's relieving to know that I can leave my worry and work to the greater God. And
All
that's
right.
one way to really get me going every day and maintain my spirit. Number
Mm-hmm.
two, as
Before we
I'm
go to number two, I just want to highlight if anybody is listening to this and finds this subject very interesting, we have Ruby here who feels very strongly about religion. Me personally, I'm a bit agnostic, but we have at least one more person who would be very happy to be talking about this. So if this subject interests you, let us know in the comments. Let us know in an email or any other way, and we'll gladly do another episode focusing on this. I'm sorry. Now, Ruby, to the
love it.
second point.
Yeah, love it. Number two, as I'm progressing in my career and also with this experience so far, looking back, there are two things that I also found it very helpful. Number one, knowing that nobody knows it all. No matter where age you are, we're all figuring out.
Mm.
Don't let the social media get you in this illusion that everyone know what's figuring out, knowing what they're doing. As we working every day in career, we're all figuring out, no matter how high level you are or where you are. So give yourself grace and also tolerance that you might not know everything, but
Yeah.
keeping that spirit that you try to figure out. And there's no solution everywhere. There's no single solution out there. But
Mm.
knowing that you are trying to seek that every day will help you to guide your life. Number two,
I
keeping
think
the
it's number
habit.
3 right now.
Yeah, number three. Oh, I'm so
We
sorry.
have reached number 3. It's all good. That's it. That's an
Okay.
improvement for us. We grew.
Constantly spend some quiet time every day. I would say as little as 5 minutes. Do a quick jot down a few lines about what are the things that you enjoy and give you energy every day, and what are things that drain
Hmm.
your energy. Now, it seems might be a very tedious exercise, but once you start doing this habit, it will help you to reflect on what are the things that will give you energy that you are interested in. Now, it's important to do that because a lot of time we are easily can see what we're tired and what draining it. It's so easy to know, like, I got to this meeting, it's really draining my energy. Or sometimes not really easily spot on what gives you the
Hmm.
energy and what are
All
these things.
right.
So I
So
would,
this was a bit of a teaser for tools, which will be something that we'll be bringing on at the end of the conversation, by the way.
oh,
So wait on for that.
okay, yeah,
Okay. So Ruby, we've talked about your identity with your kids and your identity growing up, and we talked about your identity with work and being a working mother, which is something that a lot of people can relate to. One thing that I think it's a point that we talked about, and I really, really want you to kind of highlight on, is how you handle mental health. How do you, because when we're talking about neurodiversity, and we don't need a title here again, it's not required in any way. Just what are the things that you faced? What are the things that you think are important to note regarding this?
yeah, totally. I can think of my three basic routines that guided me to maintain my mental health overall. Number one,
Mm-hmm.
set up a routine and identify what are the time of the day that give you the most energy. Now, one of the tips that I've learned from my mentor and people that I've talked to, starting from today, looking through your calendar and color coded each of the stuff that you have to deal with in a day in, day out. Then,
Mm-hmm.
after a week, looking back through the calendar, ask yourself what are the things that you spend majority of the time on? And secondly, what are the things that give you the most energy or least energy? And number two, what are things that you tend to have more energy during the day? Then set up a routine, try to get your most energized item to be done at the most best of the day that you're more focused.
Mm-hmm.
That way, putting that discipline in line will help me to feel more fulfilling every day. So that's number one. Number two,
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to spend 5 minutes per day for a very quick self journey. So, and usually I do it before bedtime. I will open up whatever notes that you have and just put a couple bullet points. Number one, what are the major highlights of your day? Number two, what are the things that give you the most joy or energy today? And number three, what are the things that you hated or like drain your energy?
Okay.
It should be short. You don't have to write, life
So you
journey.
take a bit of today's day and try to realize not what would, but what did give
Yeah,
you.
yeah,
That's a lovely one, because a lot of times I hear it being said like, try and write down the things that give you energy, and I'm like, uh, I'm sorry, can't think of anything right now.
right.
It's like my mind is a blank.
Yeah. You could be as simple as like yesterday, I can just write down lunch with friends
Yeah,
or lunch with a friend,
absolutely.
you can name. You can just
Mm.
even as little and put in like the words that you can think of. what it actually does to me, which I found it very helpful, is that as you're reviewing those short notes after a period of time, you will slowly identify a patterns of things that will give you energy in life, and what are the things that you have been bothering you or taking away energy.
I
Now,
absolutely
that's
love it.
right, and that's lead to number three, is that as we are maintaining health, and especially we're all working majority of life, and we spend so much time in a career, that leads to the point is that once you kind of know what gives you the energy, you will definitely, if you're able to take that energy or the type of interest you have and put it in your work, you will feel definitely way more enjoyable in your work life than anything else. Because
Hmm.
when you are, if you really like the certain subject, you're passionate about certain things that give you energy, time just flew by.
Yeah,
Versus if you are working on things 9 to 5 and something you don't enjoy, and that's where you will feel draining, you will feel like you're not enough. And that's one of the biggest things that I think is
lead to a
important to know
burnout, basically. Yeah.
exactly
That's
in
something
your
that we've noticed lately, right? So many people lived through like stayed in their jobs during pandemic and got out of it absolutely burned out.
mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, I love it too. Yeah.
And it's also applied for people looking for job too. I have a lot of people coming to me and saying that I don't know what I'm looking for. I don't know what I want to do in my life. This is just not like the same advice I would give to them. Try everything, but do an
Mm.
exercise of writing just down. It's like what are things that it's a highlight of your date, and what are things that you hated the most. It's easier to say what you hate than what you really like, majority. But across the
Hmm.
time, looking back on your journal, and that will essentially emerge a patterns of what gives you energy and what what you don't like. Slowly by elimination, that will help you narrow down what are the jobs that you want to pursue and give you energy and interest.
I love that too. You touched on that, so that gives me an opening. You you help people, which is a great identity to have. And you have the systems that you suggested. And one thing that I've noticed with myself is that as much as I adore systems, a lot of times I fall out of them. And I feel like I have this image always in my head, like I'm holding all of the balloons to keep the system alive. And then one thing like doesn't work. I don't know, like Tuesday I was sick. And then I feel like everything's gone away. And that's, for me, something coming from ADHD. It took me a bit of time to
Hmm.
learn. Did you have an experience helping someone with ADHD or autism or any did you have a chance to help someone with ADHD or autism or anything that is in line with these situations?
Yeah, I did in the past. I did help people with depressions and ADHD to pivot through the career. Now, everyone is very different. And
Yeah.
even with the whole range of mental health issue, there are different range as well. So every story is different. Usually the way I will approach it is like number one, thinking less is about me, is about that person. Because when you are, especially when you're career coaching, if it's all about me giving you advice, you will not have the opportunity to uncover the underlying problems or the underlying desire of the other person. So
So
humble myself.
listening first, I assume.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And number two, framework is only there as a suggestion. Nobody said like if you don't follow the framework, you're gonna fall out, you're gonna screw. Framework there is for
Nobody told me that. Why
there
didn't
you
anybody tell me this? No,
go.
I mean, once I've looked into the ADHD thing, I started finding a lot of people saying exactly what you are saying here, which basically means be flexible with yourself, plan for how your brain works, be able to adjust when, like, if you lose a string, not all the balloons are going away. That's okay.
Mhm.
But for me, at least, it also required changing the structure
Yep.
to make it reactive to these
Mhm.
situations.
Which is another great thing because you touch on framework is only there to help you to begin with or something you can paddle toward it. But hey, everyone's different. Every is there for suggestion. Most importantly is like what you pick, what work, but in the same time, try to understand what is the nuances. Now, it's not
Mm.
there to make you feel horrible. It's there to help you to learn about yourself, what
Yeah,
works and what doesn't work. And once you know, get to know about your habit and your desire better, then you already know what to do next and you feel better. More or less, it's the ability to do reflections of yourself and learn about yourself will give you more empowerment what to do next.
that's brilliant. All right. So I'm going to move on to the next question. And I'm going to give you a bit of a choice here. So the first question that we can loop in on is, as a person with so many identities, national identities, you see that now as a superpower, as something that you can leverage. How did that come into play with your work environment, with how you had, what did you have to do to use that as a superpower rather than not? Second question, which was there any moment that you can kind of pinpoint to that helped you frame your identity and leverage and grow from it?
As I'm thinking about my superpower and growing up as the immigrants and working mother, the way I'm thinking about it is instead of like I have to put on a certain identity for different time, more or less I'm reflecting on what this identity is shaping me today and helping me to operate the best that I can. So when it comes
Hmm.
to like choosing what identity I should go on next, it's all about how you want to tell your story. So a recent example that I have is that I was helping clients doing job interview for a product manager. That clients happen to be going through the same similar experience that I am. We're all immigrant kids from Asia. We're all growing up in United States. We're all looking for the next level up for the
Hmm.
career that we had. One of the questions in that interview was about what is your strength and weaknesses? As we talking through what are the weaknesses, the client actually brought up the points like, I'm very hard on myself. I'm beating myself up all the time. One example that he brought it up is like he got at the meeting from presenting a very key topic to a bunch of stakeholders. He walked out immediately thinking about, I don't do well, it's XYZ, when his manager actually gave him compliments. Now, this is the moment that I felt like this is where I think the identity comes in place, reflecting on how we're growing up as the immigrant, and especially with the Asian culture. We never being taught about feeling great about your achievement. Our parents only like generally growing up talking about picking on what you are like not good at. Good is not good enough. You have to like be better and be perfect because it takes 3 steps to move 1 step compared to like people in another culture or race in the United States.
Yeah.
Now, with that though, knowing how, reflect on how we grew up with this identity, it helped that realization of when I talked about this with the clients, is like, I think this is where we have to realize where we're coming from. And one of the weaknesses, instead of saying this weaknesses, we just have to like recognize and reframe it as
Hmm.
a way that we have to learn how to number one keep up the things that we're really good at instead of thinking like like I'm not good at, I'm like you just like give me too much compliment, like kind of
Hmm.
deflect it, own your compliment, but think of it as a way you can continue to be keeping that under your belt instead of just taking the compliment away. Something you're good at, own it and really keep that up. And number
Yeah.
two, reframe that, where we're coming from and beating ourselves down, learning to enjoy the compliment and really tell and showcase to people what you're good at, which is something we're never good at, like growing up,
Yeah.
because we're always being taught to be humble. We're always taught to about like only look at what you are not good at instead of what you're really proud of.
You
And
can
this
improve because the idea is to go up and up. You can't be static.
exactly,
Don't
yeah,
don't sit and smell the roses.
exactly. And this is where I think it's important for us to ride on our identity,
Hmm.
seeing where we're coming from, but also channel that in a way that will help us to be a better person.
That's amazing. I want to highlight. It also came up in a sense in the previous conversation because It's a very often a trait for ADHD and other neurodivergent people to judge yourself very harshly and to have higher expectations of yourself.
Mm,
And what you just said as a response, I feel like this is something that I still need to kind of take into account. And I think especially as women, we have a higher rate of imposter syndrome. And a lot
mm,
of times we also don't take compliment and we expect ourselves, sometimes it's expected of us, but a lot of times we also expect ourselves to be a certain thing. And taking what you just said, kind of leveraging this and learning to accept good feedback.
mhm.
That's a great tool. Yeah.
And you will feel so much empowering and liberating after you recognize the fact.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree with you on that one. Right. There's still some subject left on our agenda that we wanted to talk about. To an extent, you already talked to me about solutions, but I think it was more in context. I think I kind of want to hear from you, especially from someone who's a coach and has seen so many other people. What are the things that, like the must knows, the thing that if you had to highlight, what would you tell me about as a solution to how to manage your life or how to handle, your identity versus like how it goes into the work? I think while you're thinking, I just want to highlight one thing I absolutely loved about your answer before this is when I asked you like how you take your identity at work, you talked about just coming as you are. And you can pick your sides, but you're not hiding anything. Or with the neurodivergent version of it, you're not masking. So you're not taking all of that like shame and like
Mm,
you're not putting all that effort, which is an incredible thing. And I'm gonna start that as one of the best tool that I kind of took from today, because it's something that you keep telling yourself, but it's always good to remember. Less masking, more using what you have. That being
exactly.
said, passing the ball on to you. What do you feel like sharing as a tool?
Yeah, I would not say it like it's a tool, but more a mantra to myself. So as I'm going, like getting up every day, I keep reminding myself it's a whole new day. Whatever that happened yesterday is a lesson learned experience. Don't hold grudges, but also enjoy your day. And also really keeping in mind that, nobody's perfect, everybody figuring this out. What's
Yeah.
matter is you are being a better than your own self than yesterday. And that's where I think is the only thing that is a good thing to have and remind yourself every day.
Smiling because I always say that as well to an extent when somebody's like, "How are you doing?" It's like today just needs to be better than yesterday in some way, and then I'm good.
Right.
So I absolutely connect to what you
Amen.
just said,
Yeah.
because
Amen.
every day is an opportunity to do something and to be more proud of yourself. And yeah, you're gonna have some days that are not as good. That's absolutely okay. And accepting that for me was at least part of the process.
Absolutely. Knowing the days, there are days that are bad and there may be a series of unfortunate event. To that end, think of it as a way to build your character to be a better
Yeah.
self in the future. If everything rosy and gardening and nice, you would never learn. The only moment we're all learn is through like downturns and hardship, and that's the character building process that we all need to
Hmm.
go through.
Did you have, with this specific tool, which I, by the way, think is completely a tool, did you have any experience sharing that with any of your clients who you said suffered from depression? Because I think suffering from depression, this is one of the hardest things to actually accomplish.
It is. It's super hard. For clients coming to me with depression, I think number one, do seek help because I'm a career coach. But at the end of the day, you do need to seek help from medical perspective and counseling. Number two, I would say have a paper and pen, be ready and put down your thought. I do find that like putting thoughts down is very powerful,
Yeah.
especially when the day that you feel really bad, you have all the negative thought. One of the exercise that I share with everybody is that write down what a thought you have, than just like
Mm.
crash the paper, throw that away.
And it's
That
behind me.
is behind you. It's
It's
okay.
gone.
You can keep writing it nonstop until you keep throwing this out to the point it's like it
Mm-hmm.
really that throwing will really help you to take your negative thought away and you feel like, okay, I'm tired. I don't really
Have
do that.
someone else pick up the paper though, because otherwise that's a chore, right?
Or your job may be eating all this.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. Actually, I just want to extend on what you just said because writing down your thoughts, or as the psychotherapists call it, like journaling to an extent. There are a lot of methods of doing this, but this is scientifically, especially if you're writing this as a positive towards yourself sort of process. It's absolutely proven to have improved your mental health and your like well-being, and it impacts directly the neuroplasticity of your brain. So if you can kind of like, use it in a positive way, that's a tool that's absolutely proven. So thank you, Ruby, for sharing that one.
Of course.
Right. Do we have anything else that you want to highlight or something that we should all be thinking about?
I think that's all for me today. But if anyone needed help, talk to me. You can find me on LinkedIn.
I'll obviously also add the link below. So if you need it, it's absolutely there. Ruby, that was amazing. Thank you so much for all of this information, stories, you opening up. This is great. And now before we just we say goodbye and we leave everybody to go on with their life, I kind of also want to ask you, do you have anything you want to kind of share with us, like content that you like? It doesn't have to be on subject. It's just a bit of like something you enjoy, something that brings you energy, as you said before, like something that you think is worth mentioning.
I think recently I've been reading this book called Story Worthy by Matthew Dix, which is a
Okay.
great book to not just helping you about storytelling, which is essentially for our work, but
Yeah.
I found it super useful for us to learn how to do journaling a little bit and also talk about your life story. I absolutely recommend this book and I would love to share it with everybody because this is where you will find it useful to your personal as well as your professional life. Something for everybody that looking for mental health, I think it's a great way for you to learn, a way to tell your stories.
I love it. You have it right next to you. That just highlights how much of a true recommendation this is. Can you tell us in a word or two?
Absolutely. So one of the patterns that Matthew have talked about is about the journaling of life. That's exactly what we talked about. It's like every day you spend 5 minutes putting down like as little as like words or short sentences about what is your highlight of your day and what are the things that you want to remember for that day. And one of the things he definitely talked about is like a lot of people don't know what story they want to tell about themselves and don't even know where they want to seek the next step. This is an exercise that they would find it helpful as you working on journaling every single day with the bullet points. Try to review that from time to time, and slowly you will realize that there will be a patterns emerge that will tell you about
Mm.
what are the things about your memory, what is your energies, and what are things that you don't like. So it's a very useful tool, not just learning about telling your own story, but even before you telling story, you learn so much about yourself and where your source of energy come from. I highly recommend to people to read the book,
Okay.
but also actually doing the exercise every day to help learning so much about yourself and enabling you to tell a story about yourself too.
Would it also be helpful to eventually be able to tell your story? I mean, in platforms like this naturally, but
Mhm.
also, a lot of times when we are interviewing to companies, we need to kind of sum up what we think is most important, what is story worthy, right?
Exactly. So this is where, as you learn about your own story, that will help you to craft no matter where you go. Career searching interview is definitely one of the many journey, but it could
Mm.
be your relationship with husband, with kids, and even with yourself too. Because a lot of time it's all about how you reframe your mind, talking to yourself, in all
Okay.
kind of ups and downs in life.
Helping
And
you
it's
understand your narrative, basically.
exactly. It's all
And then you
about
can pass it on.
yep, and it's all about your narrative. Can you even reframe it? And what are the patterns in your life?
Wow. Yeah, that's super cool. Thank you for that. All right, Ruby, that has been amazing. Thank you again so much for your time. And again, I'm just reminding you guys, Ruby has raised one subject of religion and the impact that this has on her life. But if this is something that you feel is interesting, leave a comment, message me. My email will always be down there in the description. And yeah, everybody, stay odd and have a great day.